Hi, my name is Kirsty French. I work for the University of Cambridge Museums as an organics conservator, although you see us here working with plaster casts. But for the last 4 years we have been doing a full collections survey, and from this we have pinpointed conservation tasks that we have been doing. So last winter we took down Medusa and had her conserved, and we got her back up on the wall again, which you can see in Bay A when you visit the gallery. So here we're looking at the Bassae casts. There are 19 of these wonderful slabs depicting a war. So through the condition assessment, we noticed that some of them were showing signs of ageing. So they were made in the 1880s, which is understandable why they're showing their age.
Tell us how you survey the Bassae Frieze, because it's obviously very high up.
Yes, so we surveyed it by, first of all, we were trained in how to use scaffolding, putting up and moving scaffolding, and then after this we were very lucky that we managed to buy a MUP, which is a mobile elevated working platform, which means it's electric, so it goes up and down and we can drive it around the museum. So every 2 or 3 months we go up and we look at the casts, we take very detailed photographs and we compare if there's any changes to them. So here they're being moved from hanging on brackets that are embedded in the back of the casts, which I'm sure you'll see an image of at some point, and they are then going to be put on shelves, so they are load bearing from the bottom of the cast, so there's no strain whatsoever on the rest of the cast, with a hook over the top so they can't fall forwards. So plaster is inherently very brittle, so you'll be able to see that some of them have chips on them, which we think happened when they moved here in the early 80s, and they're very susceptible to changing environmental conditions. So if the temperature goes up, because they've got iron armatures inside them, they expand and contract at different rates. So the metal will expand, but the plaster won't. So this can cause some structural instabilities. So plaster is not like marble, it is very soft, and yes, like all materials, it ages over time.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a freelance conservator brought on to work on the Bassae Project.
Do you want to tell us how plaster casts are made?
Sure. So plaster casts are made from something called gypsum plaster, which has been heated, and then you add water to it to make a mixture. And that mixture is poured into molds that have been made from the original objects, sometimes out of plaster, sometimes out of other materials, to which interior armatures have been added. So usually wood or iron supports or hessian can be added, sometimes paper or other materials. What we found with the Bassae casts is that most of them have iron armatures inside, and these have also been corroding and showing signs of their age as well. So here is the back of one of the Bassae casts. It's in the process of conservation at the moment. So you can see that it's not solid on the back. The workshop has poured some plaster thicker in some areas to fit the design on the front side. So these are where some of the figures are. And you can also see some of the iron supports they've added. So here's one down here, and then there's an iron support running through it as well, to which these were the original hanging mechanisms are attached. And if you look here, you can see that they've added plaster to the hanging mechanisms, and possibly some other materials as well.
What's that brown stuff?
Which brown stuff?
So here you have discoloration.
This here.
Yeah.
So sometimes when plaster would be added after the original plaster had already cured, So in this case, they were adding supports to the back. And when they would add plaster, sometimes they would add an adhesive or a glue like animal glue, which is what we think based on the time period. This is probably an animal glue that has been added to the plaster to help this additional plaster adhere. So because of the nature of plaster and its composition, it will take on water from the environment. So if you have a very high relative humidity, so a high percentage of water in the air, the plaster itself can take on that water, and then the interior supports especially can corrode.
Could you explain to us exactly how you take a mold of a statue?
Sure. So I'm mostly familiar with plaster molds that are made.
Yeah.
So a structure will be built around the original statue, and then the statue will be coated, usually in a release agent, and then the plaster mixture that is going to make the mold will be poured all around that. And then when that's cured, they tend to cut it apart in pieces so that it will fit together in chunks. And you can actually see evidence of this on some casts we have here. They're called flash marks. Some studios take them off, some leave them on. It just depends on what's needed.
Okay. Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm a conservation student at Durham University, and I'm currently on my practical year here in Cambridge, working with Kirsty. I'm going to explain to you how we are treating the plaster cast. So the first thing we are doing is dry cleaning, because they are very susceptible to water. So we try to remove as much of the surface dust first by brushing them and using a vacuum. So we have different brushes, for example a very soft Bristol brush which we use to remove the main surface dust, and then everything that's a little bit heavier we are going to use a Bristol brush which is a little bit harder. Yeah. Then also we have some erasers which are conservation grade, so we use those to remove some of the staining. And then for liquid damage that we can see, we are using very lightly blotted cotton swabs with deionized water, and just use them very carefully and very locally to remove the staining. So some of them, as you can see up here, at the deer, they are missing some of the paint. So what we are doing is we consolidate them first, and then afterwards we match the color with acrylics and paint them in. In case we encounter any plaster casts that have any structural instability, we would use little staples on the backside. So like it's done in stone conservation or statue conservation, we would drill very little holes into them and then insert a little staple to add some support.
We'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Clifton Conservation for all their expertise and for being part of this project and running the show. Alex and Richard have been fantastic, and we'd also like to thank Suzanne, who's the curator here, and the department for supporting all the conservation work that has been undergone.